Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kazi Altaf. Welcome to Stories Without Borders, episode 6. Today we have Staci Prevato, a Peace Corps volunteer and also Community Development Associate. Welcome, Staci.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. Staci, if you can kindly briefly introduce yourself to us.
Yes, of course. My name is Staci Prevato. I am currently serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in North Macedonia. I am from Denver, Colorado, and I graduated from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, with my degree in international business and globalization. Since then, I've had the pleasure of working in California, Hong Kong, Houston, and now North Macedonia.
So, Stacy, you said you're from Colorado, right? And
Yes.
you completed your education in from University of Colorado?
Yes, I went to the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs.
Hmm.
I did a program, it's the only one of the kind called the Bachelor of Innovation, where the premise is you can learn innovation as you could any other skill. So instead of taking normal elective classes, we took innovation core classes where we learned how to work together with individuals from multidisciplinary backgrounds, such as teachers, software engineers, and we worked specifically for clients on projects. So I worked with a woman by the name of Alex Merrill. She developed a luxury travel platform. And then I also worked with a woman by the name of Judy Odith, works in Panama on a cat sanctuary. So it was a really great opportunity to, as a very young person, get exposed to a lot of different skill sets and people around the world.
What motivated you to take your subject of focus? What was the motivation that you chose that?
In terms of international business or in
Yes,
globalization?
both globalization and international business.
I would say as a young person, especially growing up in America, I grew up in Colorado. There's 5 military bases, and you kind of hear a lot about the world from there. And just kind of recognizing and believing in entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship really brings community together. It develops growth, it drives communities, it drives the entire global economy. So wanting to understand how when you have at this point in times, some of these most major companies, banks that have been deemed too big to fail, technology platforms that span cross borders and cross foreign state agents, understanding how that interconnects, where the money is going, and how we're really all connected, and how to best work within that system to hopefully make a better world.
Hmm. And what do you think after completing this, have has that, provided you I would say the launching pad into what you're doing right now? Is there relevance to what you studied and what you're doing?
I would say yes and no, because the world has changed so much in the past 5 years, even the past 10 years. We're seeing new technologies, new platforms, new businesses. We're seeing exponential growth in sectors that nobody would really have even considered like science fiction 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Um, so I would say some of the skills that my university developed in me, the ability to work collaboratively, the ability to communicate, the ability to question and innovate and design. Those are all things that are timeless and very essential to what I do. In terms of accounting, maybe not so much. It is always good to know how to read a spreadsheet. That has helped me having a general base knowledge to be able to feel confident saying, okay, like I know in theory what this should look like. How can I actually understand this more?
Hmm. And currently you are with the Peace Corps. Can you kindly describe your experience with the Peace Corps? How fruitful has it been, and also your challenges through the Peace Corps up until today, all the goods and the bads?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, so I learned about Peace Corps all the way back in 2016. I hadn't even graduated high school. And one of my friends, her step sibling, had actually just early terminated. And so we were talking about that. And that's when I learned what the Peace Corps was. And I applied to Peace Corps in 2020 when the entire program was shut down. All the volunteers had just been evacuated a few months prior. As kind of just like if it's meant to be, it's going to happen. If not, um, and I didn't enter service until September of 2023. Things just aligned in a way that I felt most confident going forward into it. It has been nothing like I imagined it would be in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
I mean, first and foremost, I thought I was going to be in South Asia. Um, or I thought I was going to be in North Africa. So being put in Europe and in the Balkans was interesting. Um, it's been very eye-opening. I've learned a lot about the world. I've learned a lot about myself. Learning and understanding multiple ethnicities, learning and understanding. We kind of talked about this a few months ago. Nationalism versus what is it? The like nationalism versus ethnicism and like where people lie, and growing up as American, like I was always like American first versus like not having that and seeing that in most of the rest of the world. Um, but also it's been amazing, getting to meet these people and see what they're doing, seeing the differences in the education systems and how people talk about change and collaboration and just like general belief in common sense, like how common sense changes based on what culture you're in. Like, I don't know the first thing about, a lot of these village practices. So living in a small country that I can ask my friend Maria, for example, who we go to her village, for example, right? And she's like, my grandma lived in this house and she was born in this house. And then her grandma was born in this house. And like to know like generation after generation for 500, 600, 700 years is baffling to me as an American with both of my parents essentially immigrated to the US. One immigrated 400 years ago, the other immigrated in his lifetime. So to like have that immediate connection to the land is amazing. That's something I never would have thought of, and how that affects how they see their land, see their culture, see how they want to change things or not change things. It's been very eye-opening, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I would say it has been my watershed moment when I speak to everyone. I agree with you. It is eye-opening in terms of global collaboration. Now, if I speak about the cultural aspect of it, I have known about South Asia and Africa and America, but Eastern Europe was a whole different landscape.
Yeah. I I genuinely can say I knew nothing about the Balkans. I knew about Poland. That was about the extent of my knowledge to Eastern Europe. I knew about Lithuania because I was friends with a girl from Lithuania. Um, I knew about Greece. Like who doesn't know like Greek antiquity? But you really get into like the Ottoman and the Byzantine and the development that happens in Eastern Europe was something that I was totally like unaware of, like most of my education either focused on Western Europe and the colonization that Western Europe did, specifically in Southeast Asia and the Americas.
Mhm.
So like to come in and have this very complex, rich history that's kind of doesn't get talked about on the global stage. It's just like, oh yeah, the Balkans, they fight. And it's like, well, no, like why? Like what really went into this region, Because like in a lot of ways it connects the west to the east. And it's that start of that entry as you get further and further away from like these Western European values and cultures and identities.
So, through the Peace Corps, you have been practicing cross-cultural communication and also cross-border
Hopefully.
collaboration. No, definitely,
Yes.
because as an American, you're in the Balkans, and you're currently in Këçovo, which is an Albanian majority community, and you're in Macedonia. So you are in a place where you have to communicate with Macedonians, with Albanians, and then as an American. So you are practicing that. But also, in addition to that, you're also doing cross-border collaborations. So what has been your experience in both on the professional and personal level?
So I'll start with the professional level.
Mhm.
I worked on a project this past year with it was a cross-border collaboration. So it was between two organizations in Greece, an organization in Montenegro, and my organization here in Macedonia. And the biggest takeaway I took from that was essentially we all have immediate different assumptions. And when you're working with these cross-cultural teams, you have to really break down the language barrier, right? I speak English as a first language. Everyone I work with speaks English as a second language. So for me, using idioms, using sayings, using
Mm,
certain academic or professional terminology that's very common in corporate America that I've worked in, axing that out because they don't understand that. And vice versa, if they say like, okay, we're gonna have a Teams meeting, or we're gonna have a Zoom meeting, um, understanding that there might be more technological issues, or the assumption of who's going to be on video, who's not going to be on video. Or, for example, on the project, we talked about having video lectures. We all had immediate different assumptions when we said video lecture. So really breaking that down and understanding where people are coming from to create a product or a change that negates the miscommunication that can happen. Because if I say, oh, we're going to have a video lecture, and if you think it's going to be a Zoom recording like this where I'm talking to you, and I think it's going to be like a TED talk, we gotta we gotta figure that out, and having those active discussions and being like, well, what do you think of when I say this?
mhm,
It has really helped me like communicate
mm.
with people of different cultures. Um, Personally, as you mentioned, Këçovo is a multi-ethnic city. Are you still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, 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 Stacy. Yes, yes.
Okay. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
I can. Yes.
Okay. But what I was saying is Këçovo being a multi-ethnic city, give me well, okay. Is this better?
Yes, it's better. Yes.
Sorry. Thank you. Technology issues. As I was just saying. On a personal level, working with people as a foreigner, right? As an American foreigner, living in a city that has a very rich, deep history with multiple ethnicities, understanding that it's not my job and it's not my place to go in and try to like explain or give academic terms or give an opinion on the issues or the values that they see in their city. My job is to listen and to observe and to work within that so that they feel respected and understood. And to not kind of like push my opinion and be like, well, only if you did this. Like that saying of if you only did this is the single worst thing that I can do developing personal relationships in my city. Like my job is to listen and to understand.
Mhm. And in the Peace Corps and the professional setting, as you said, can you hear me, Stacy?
Okay. Ooh.
So, Stacy, I apologize, folks. So we had slight technological issue. Uh, Stacy, you worked, as I know, you have worked with the city council in Këçovo. Currently, you're working with an INGO, International Space Alliance. So, can you explain your work experience or your professional experience in terms of what have you experienced in the government sector in Macedonia, which is a government entity, the city council, but also the NGO sector?
Yeah, so if you ever have the opportunity to like learn about the Balkans, or if you ever have the opportunity to come into the Balkans, or you're listening to the news, I know Albania was just on BBC because they introduced an AI minister. You're gonna hear corruption. Like that's the first thing that people will say is, "Oh, our governments are so corrupt, or our people are so corrupt." And it's really easy to say that and kind of have again like that mental idea of what it looks like as opposed to like what it actually looks like. And in my experience working with the local municipality and the local city council, um, it's prevalent in a way that's not what you see in the movies. You know, it's not just like, oh, here's a briefcase of money and you're going to pass this bill, which is, it would be so much more interesting if it was like that.
Hmm.
But it's very much more personal connection and how much they like you, right? So I will say, as opposed to some of my fellow volunteers who also work with local municipalities, I have a few benefits. Is that I'm young and I'm a pretty woman, right?
Hmm.
And so there are times where when working with the local municipality, it's not what I have to bring to the table. It's not, oh, I'm doing this and like they're so grateful for my help. That does not exist. It's very much how they get to feel when they feel that they're helping me out, right? And so that's kind of how I've seen some of the corruption in the region is it's very little to do with um personal skill, and it's very much to do with personal relationships and the relationships you have and you develop. So that's been my experience with the local municipality. And I have done some very good work with them, and I do have a lot of individuals I really like and I very much respect within the local municipality. But it is still a consideration of, again, I'm a foreigner coming in and working in their municipality. And I'm to their eyes, for a lot of their young eyes, like I'm a young woman, right? And it's like, well, what is my place? What skills do I really have to go in and tell them what to do, right? So it's being able to develop my own projects that support them and fill the gaps that they have, right? So, for example, even before I got into the city identified youth leadership and youth development as something that was lacking. And so it's easy to say, oh, yeah, like we want you to develop our youth, but doing that practically, reasonably, respectfully, in a way that actually benefits the community and benefits the kids is developing the resources that are already existing, right? Developing the current teachers or the current administration and identifying ways that they can step in. And then it's also like, okay, like, yeah, like you need a youth worker in your municipality, but me saying to you, like, hey, you need a youth worker in your municipality, that's the same thing that the government does.
Hmm.
So it's like, how do you actually develop any variation of personal responsibility into your work, you know? And especially as a foreigner, right? Is it really my place to say, like, hey, you need to take responsibility in what you do? Because this is your city, this is your life, this is your culture. So doing it in a way that's respectful and still doing variations of development, right? So like I've had the opportunity to work with multiple young women in the city and better develop them in project development with kids, you know, so understanding budgets, understanding timelines, understanding how to execute a project and utilizing their resource. So that's the way that I've been able to fill the gap. There's still work that needs to be done. And we'll see how it happens. I have a lot of hopes, especially for the people that I've worked with, to at least take a little bit of what we've worked with together and continue that independently. In terms of the NGO space, I would say it's pretty. I would say it's similar in the sense of, again, developing those personal connections, then that personal like personality. How much do we vibe with you? Because within the Balkans, the EU has identified the Balkans as a developing region. And a lot of Balkan countries, such as North Macedonia and Albania and Kosovo, they're not in the EU, but they are eligible to receive funding from the EU. So, a lot of the EU grants that are popular within this region or available to this region focus on cross-border collaboration. So, it's finding NGOs in Poland and Kosovo and Serbia and Albania, you know, and having a variation of mutual understanding with those NGOs. And again, having a mutual understanding of like, well, what success is going to look like, right? Because in my experience here in the NGO space, and I can't say if this is the NGO space as a whole, right? But there's a lot of over promising and under delivering, you know? And it's a lot of it, and it also in the local municipalities, it's a very much, in my experience, has been like, yeah, we'll do that. And then it's like, okay, how? When? Do you have resources? And it's like, no, we'll find it. And that stresses me out so much, and they do it. They put it together and they execute it and things happen. And I'm just like, could we have done this better? And are you in a space that we can actually have a conversation of this is what we did? How do we actually improve upon it? So you're not scrambling last second to do this 8 times over, and then you burn out, or, oh, this would have been great, but then we should have done this. How do we reduce the should haves in our future projects, because it's not just like a one and done, we saved the Balkans. It's a persistency.
Hmm. Hmm. You did mention about now one thing that's happening in the world that the grants in the NGO sector, it's becoming more scarce, right? What would be your suggestion or strategies, and based on your experience right now, and you've been working for the last two years, right, with the NGO sector, what strategies and what other alternates have you been able to find out in terms of the alternates to grants? How can NGOs around the world tackle this climate of lack of NGO funding, especially the grants?
Yeah, so I would say, both in my experience and my observations, of the NGO space as a whole, right? It's very, it's not just like me saying this from this is also me repeating from what other people have observed and other people how they've been successful. Is when you're an NGO, right? You're a non-governmental organization, you're a nonprofit organization, you are reliant on other people for money.
Hmm.
And in some degree, you are essentially reliant on the exact industry you're trying to change to give you money to change their industry. And then it's a question of how interested are they really in changing their industry or changing what you're trying to change or affect. So, as grant funding shifts, right, there was a trend in grant funding the last 5, 10 years on sustainability. So, most NGOs moved into that. Um, we've kind of shifted away from that, and a lot of funding is going into national security. And
Yes.
looking at the state of the world, it's going into national security, it's going into certain research, development, cybersecurity. As an NGO, if you're focused on youth development, or as an NGO, if you're focused on women's rights, realistically, how do you
Cope.
identify grants that are focused on national security? It's you're going to have to be creative, or you have to shift from being a nonprofit into a social enterprise, and developing something that is going to give you funding, your own internal funding, so you're not constantly reliant on other people funding you. Because as we've seen and as we're going to continue to see, it's going to shift, right?
Yes.
So to really have, in my opinion, to really have that sustainability and that impact that you're looking to have, the best way to do it is as a social enterprise. Because unless you're a Mackenzie Scott or a Bill Gates Foundation, and you have so much money that you just don't know what to do with it and you give it out,
Mhm.
it's going to be really hard to be a grassroots NGO that's always relying on other people for funding.
I completely agree with you. Globally, social entrepreneurship is not practiced enough. It
Mhm.
has been overlooked, but we are seeing a shift to more from international aid to national security. And this will continue to go on, as you said. No, and I reiterate that also, that yes, it will be the situation. More and more grants, for example, in the past, UNDP, uh, they do have projects in South Asia. We don't have the USAID right now throughout the world.
Yeah, we
USAID
totally at
USAID
USAID.
was a massive donor to especially health related and women related projects, women empowerment and health related projects in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and where I'm from, South Asia. After the USAID, organizations, especially the grassroots organizations, they have no other alternatives. So social entrepreneurship is, I think, is a necessity right now for organizational sustainability. For your organization that you're working, currently you're working with ESA only, or you're working with some other organizations?
So I work with the my town's local scout unit. I work with the my town's Red Cross, and then I also do work with the International Space Alliance. Um, in addition to being a Peace Corps volunteer and doing on and off projects through the local municipality.
Mm,
Um, the Red Cross is safe in a lot of ways because it is so well founded, it's so well established, it's so well respected, and it also has an international component that helps like top down, you know what you're doing, you know how you're doing it, you know how to mobilize, right? Because they have 100+ years of experience in developing those strategies. Um, the Scouts, equally, they're an international organization, but they have local impact, have both that ability to essentially like they take funds from families, like when you're a scout, you pay, and it's a very little amount, right? But it's kind of like they pay and it goes into the pot so you can get badges or t-shirts or they do an excursion. And they can also, there's a certain level of pride on being a scout, right? Like I'm proud to say like I work with the scouts. And if I had a kid come up to me and they're like, oh, I'm a scout in like Belgium or I'm a scout in somewhere else, I feel like I will do so much for you. So having that personal relation, and having that camaraderie from a shared experience is a powerful thing that they utilize. Um, International Space Alliance is a young organization, but it has a certain level of prestige, both because of the founder, Martina Demowska, who is North Macedonia's only NASA contractor, first and only NASA contractor, and who developed the uh, basically the charter for North Macedonia to start developing a space agency. But then we've also opened up an office in California, and we have two founders in California who are phenomenally intelligent. One has worked with Google and is an expertise in AI. The other is also very familiar with like product development, the technology space. So again, having their background and expertise, like ESA USA is going to grow exponentially faster than ESA North Macedonia will because of just a difference in resources from where they're originating.
mhm,
Like ESA Macedonia, you're living in a country that is like, when I tell people I work with Martina, or I tell people like, yeah, I work with like, they hear space, they're like, the moon landing though, did it really
mm.
happen? And it's like, okay, like
Okay.
I I don't know, but you have a phone, you have a GPS, like that's from satellites, man. You have Elon Musk, he threw a car into space, like I don't know what to tell you. So just like having the cultural knowledge and the cultural interest and the local resources. There's not a Google headquarters in North Macedonia. Like I would love it if there was, and North Macedonia would also probably love it, but we have to utilize different resources, and that's okay.
So the last two questions would be, and it will be together. In terms of social entrepreneurship, I would want to add some examples for our viewers in terms of social entrepreneurship. For example, in agricultural communities where they rely on agricultural produces, especially interconnected communities.
Sorry, you totally froze. Can you repeat that?
Oh, I apologize. I apologize.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was talking about social entrepreneurship. Few examples of social entrepreneurship. I'm going back to the social entrepreneurship because that's very important to discuss in terms of sustainability. And as we are also a community-based NGO, our focus, how can we counter, what are the ideas that you can provide uh, living and working in a small community of social entrepreneurship? What are some of the strategies of social entrepreneurship? That's one question. The last question is, what is your suggestion or what is your, I would say, advice to the world in terms of cross-border collaboration, which is right now, again, I would say it goes hand in hand with social entrepreneurship. It's equally important, cross-border collaboration. So those two things, social entrepreneurship and cross-border collaboration. One is the advice, for cross-border collaboration and some suggestions for the social entrepreneurship.
So for your first question on social entrepreneurship, um, I'm gonna say what I've told one of my students here is you cannot change everything, right? The world has a lot of problems, and you as an individual cannot solve every problem of the world. However, you can do a really good job solving one problem, right? So, for example, there was a couple, I think it was in Brazil or Argentina, who were decided to replant an entire forest, right? And through their independent effort in that one region has restored the entire ecology of the
Okay.
region, right? There's other stories of people who get so invested. There's, I think, a gentleman out in California. I wish I could like quote these names, but I'm forgetting them. Who's done so much work to restore one specific butterfly population. And like on one hand, it's like, okay, that's great for them, but we have so many problems. But we have so many problems because nobody is really focusing hardcore on one thing, right? So when you start a social entrepreneurship or you start focusing on impacting the world, it's okay if you choose one thing and being really, really good at that one thing. It's like not to make a sports analysis, right? But in the Olympics, right? An Olympic athlete, a track and field runner, they're not going and being amazing. They're not like the number one in jumping and the number one in swimming. No, they're really good at running 400 meters. They're the best of the best at running 400 meters. And that's totally okay and totally extraordinary and worth celebrating and honoring, because like at the end of the day, that's still an issue and it's an issue that needs to get affected. And it's much better to be really good at solving one issue, whether let's say you're educating women on their health, or you're teaching kids how to type, you're teaching kids how to use technology, not just like Chromebooks, but like actual proper, how do you utilize a desktop? Or, for example, with ESA, right? Space education. We only really talk about space. We talk about the things that are happening in the space industry. We don't go into personal finance. We don't go into personal leadership, right? Because like that's not our thing. Our
Stick to
thing
your
is space.
strength. Hmm.
Yeah, stick to your strength. Find your strength, develop your strength, execute it really well. And if you have 10 NGOs or 10 social enterprises that are focusing on 20 or 30 different things, it's not going to have the same impact as if you have 10 NGOs focused on 5 things or 10 that are focused on 10 things, because it's going to get a more higher concentration of resources.
Hmm. Okay. And we only have about 3.5 minutes. If you can just
Yeah.
shortly explain what's more.
Cross-border collaboration. Today's world, I don't think borders exist anymore in the traditional sense, because if you look at US elections, the international influence that's happened on those, likewise in other countries, um, technology's changed the game. It's changed the game in a lot of ways that we don't really understand yet. So finding people with similar values, finding similar issues and creating like a more strengthened defense, right? And also like environmentally, if you're let's say you're all in the Vardar region, or you're all in the Balkan region, or you're all in the Himalayan region, right? And maybe that region spans cross-border, that's still one place that you're able to, I say like, oh, like I want to protect the Amazon, and all the states within the Amazon are like, okay, like this is what we're going to do that. Finding regions or areas to have that mutual collaboration and mutual identity of support, and similar values, I think is the most impactful way to really have that cross-border collaboration. Like similarly, as I mentioned earlier with the Scouts, right? The Scouts is an international organization, but there's still that shared interest. There's that shared love in what it really means to be a Scout. So that is what I will say there.
Perfect. Thank
I
you.
hope that answers your question.
Yes, that does. Cross-border. What's more important, as you mentioned, that on the traditional sense, borders don't exist. We just have to understand that the best way to sustain our world in any sector or in any industry is to just accept each other and implement whatever we are doing for the betterment of the rest of the world.
Yeah. Whatever you do, do it well.
Do it well, yes. As you said, focus on your strength. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Stacy, for your time. Thank you, folks. And we will see you all in our next episode. Thank you, Stacy. Have a
Thank you
good
so
one.
much.
Take care.
You too.